And hello, movie lovers. So today I have a very special guest. I have one of my good friends, and that's 50 Shades of Geek. And we're going to be talking about this little indie short film that's actually a contender for the Oscars, and that is NAKAM. I think that's how you say it, but my guest will actually correct me in a few minutes on how I actually say the pronunciation on it. But with further ado, let's go on ahead. Let's get started. I'm excited to have 50 here for the very first time, and I'm also happy to be able to do this review. And hey, 50, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. It's good to actually have you on here for the very first time. I've been wanting to work with you for a little bit. It's actually an honor to be able to have you here on the show.
The pleasure is all mine.
All right. So my question is this: how do you actually say the name? Because I think I just butchered it. NAKAM? NAKAM? Or
NAKAM.
N-A-K NAKAM. Okay, NAKAM. Okay.
NAKAM is it's derived from the Hebrew word for revenge or vengeance, nekama.
Exactly. And this is actually based on a true story about the NAKAM, who was basically primarily organization about 50 Holocaust survivors who, after 1945, sought renegade revenge for the murder of 6 million Jews during the Holocaust. Now, this is actually part of the Holy Shorts Film Festival, but this is actually what the plot line is. It's about a 12-year-old violin player named Mitka. Mitka. That's it, Mitka. It's supposed to execute an attack on, Mitka?
Mitka.
Okay. To execute an attack on several SS officers in the name of the Ukraine partisan movement, but he will also put his only friend in life danger. So what I like about this film is how it sets up. I like how it starts off in this little small tavern. He's playing the violin, and then of course we wind up seeing the conflict coming in at hand. I like how the music changes just as the general basically comes into the tavern, and it basically has its own theme song if you think about it, about how the whole entire thing just all of a sudden just changes. And I know the Germans at that time, they didn't like certain types of music and stuff like that, so that's probably why they changed it. But I think that's just a special theme also too for the movie itself. But what do you think?
Yeah, and not just with the music, but also with the reaction on the pianist and the little kid playing the violinist. Their whole faces, their whole body language changes as soon as the SS officer walks in, and it's like that moment you realize it's the oh shit moment, like oh no, and as a viewer, that sends a message to you as a viewer of like it sets up the time period perfectly. You don't even need to know the exact year. You don't need to know the rest of the context. You just see the SS officer walks in, and it's like our own personal history, or your knowledge of his world history immediately kicks in, and that's what the trigger that send you the messages of shit's gonna go down, essentially.
Exactly. And that's something that I really liked was the reactions of how reactionary that they were and how honest that they were towards those characters, where you actually do care about them to the point where it's like, oh, what's going to happen within this world and everything too, because of the fact that you're scared for the both of them. Because basically whenever that officer walks in, it's basically you're part of their property, basically. And therefore they want you to do whatever they want you to do. Just like whenever the general tells them, look, have you do you play for money? And then they turn around and say, no, he plays for food. So that tells me that he's also comes from like a poor family or not a family at all, when we finding out later on, and why he's even there in the first place. And it just, to be honest with you, food is more important than money, because of the fact that you need money, you need food to survive. So to play for food just goes to show you how much that they've taken from them. You know what I mean?
How the desperation.
Exactly. The desperation, and also too the will to survive, and to be able to survive against these generals and these people. You know what I'm saying? And I think that this is actually really shocking in a sense of the viewer of seeing this in this kind of context.
And they managed to establish a lot with very limited dialogue in that scene. They tell you just how bad things are for this little kid, and with movies being a show don't tell type medium, for us, the way we're all wired, myself especially, obviously, the way we're all wired as people, as human beings, you see someone wearing the SS uh, insignia and the Nazi uniform, that automatically registers as the villain of the piece, the villain of the movie. Like the Nazis, for better or for worse, they're often used to great effect as villains, whether it be
Mhm.
actual proper Nazis like in the Indiana Jones movies, or someone that shall we say, uses Nazi-like imagery to convey that idea, and immediately puts it in a villain context, like the hyenas marching in The Lion King, like the organization of the Galactic Empire in Star Wars, like the propensity to, rather, the emphasis on racial purity, namely the Daleks from Doctor Who. So that idea is like, that's an automatic villain. Like, and I use the example of someone that I think we both know of and follow almost religiously, is John Campea once said about the Crisis on Earth X crossover with
Yeah,
the Arrowverse, where you need an easy villain. Always bet on Nazis. That's always a safe bet. So, like, when before, even before the officer starts to speak, and we later obviously learn that the pianist, I mean, he understands German, but he doesn't fully speak it. But the kid does understand German, and he understands what they're talking about. You automatically, I mean, it's involuntary. You automatically choose sides in the conflict, whether you want to or not. You're automatically on the kid's side and against the officer's side.
exactly. Especially when we find out later on why we're on his side, though, too, because some stuff winds up happening with him and his own family members too. But we'll get to that in a few minutes. But another thing that I want to mention is the foreshadowing in this short film, though, too, because the general mentions the dog, right? And he says nothing but skin and bones, and it's foreshadowing what happens to the dog later on in the film, because all they think of him is skin and bones. They don't think of this person as this pet as a pet. They just think of it as a thing, and that's it, just skin and bones. Just like how they probably think of people as skin and bones as
Yeah,
well, and that's all
that
they think of.
that is really one of the defining characters of the Nazis, is that they view everyone else who isn't like them inferior, as I mentioned earlier with the Daleks from Doctor Who. Everything that's not like them is either lesser, they don't deserve to live, and therefore considered the enemy.
Exactly. And then the German general wants Mecca to play for their soldiers for money, but he Mecca plays for money. Of plays for food. Sorry, I got tongue tied. But then the old man, the piano player, doesn't like the idea. You can actually tell he doesn't like the idea of them playing, and you can definitely tell. Well, what if we mess up? What if something else happens while we're playing and they witness it? Therefore, they have to basically be killed because of what they saw, because they don't want somebody else in the town to probably see it either. So that's something else that I was actually going through my mind as I was putting myself in the shoes of that person that was on the piano, the guy who was playing the piano, and wondering to myself what would happen if I was actually playing. It's actually a scary thought.
Yeah, and it's a very intrinsic thing in movies set around that time, particularly from the point of view of uh, the citizens, is that they can get shot in broad daylight for nothing, for no reason at all, just because they misheard something, or because they looked at the officer for too long, or because the officer just didn't like the way that they dress or whatever. So, and this happens in a lot of these Holocaust type movies. And yeah, and even though the kid Mitka pretends not to understand what they were saying, he then later essentially screws up by letting by talking to the pianist in Russian, not realizing that the German the SS officer knows a little bit of Russian, and he actually understood what they were talking about, and so it's very skating dangerously, very swimming in very dangerous water type territory. Like in these types of situations, the smart thing to do is to get away from the problem as much as possible, to be as unnoticeable as you can, which unfortunately the main character doesn't do that in that
No,
moment.
no, and that's one thing I like about him is the fact that he doesn't back down or anything like that. You can definitely tell he has that pissed off look on his face. Like he's really wants to lay into these generals, but at the same time he knows he can't. So therefore he has to refrain from that. So I definitely like how he takes a minute to just basically just back away from the situation in the sense in his head and be like, well, look, I gotta go now. I have to go, I have to go back home. And he's also asking the general's also asking him questions though too. He's like, "Well, do you have parents?" He said, "No, I don't have any parents or anything."
Yeah,
So that led you to believe too he might be an orphan. But then when you get into this whole entire deal where you wind up seeing him with this other person that's actually going through the same thing, same motions that he's going through, and you realize, oh, this guy took him in under his own wing, and they're both out for revenge on these
yeah,
guys because they both did something terrible uh to their past. And a matter of fact, um with Mitka, he's actually looking for revenge because of the fact that he killed these people. Nazis killed their his parents.
yeah.
So he had the motivation behind that.
And at the same time, you also realize he's not actually playing for food. He's playing there because he knows that is a tavern that the Nazis frequently visit, and he specifically we wanted to be there to listen of when of this really big important officer in the SS was going to sit down with a bunch of others and have a meeting. Like they planned this. They essentially he's a plant in that tavern. He's not a random orphan who playing
No.
just to survive. It was all planned.
And
The NAKAM planned this whole scenario.
another thing I liked though, 50 was this, like whenever he gets go basically on his way out, he sneaks off into the basement area, puts his violin up. Now, my second time viewing this, I didn't realize that he already had the explosives underneath the basement already in that little hole. So I like the detail in it where, oh, you already have, like you said, they already have this thing planned out from day one, and you already have like 3 or 4 explosives already in there ready to go at the right time.
Yeah,
And the violin is also a cover up. So it has this desperado Antonio Banderas kind of way of actually doing something, which is something I really liked.
yeah, and I saw him. I didn't rewatch this, but I did see him put something in the hole. I just didn't understand what it is. But then later, when we meet the other guy and that they have the explosives, and he teaches him how to prime the explosives, you realize, oh, the thing he put in the hole, that's the explosive, and that's part of the assassination attempt, as a sort of way of saying it. It's all connected to that. That was a great moment of realization for me.
Exactly. And then, you get into this other thing where it's like the next day, he goes up to the tavern. Mitka goes over to the tavern and he sees a body hanging up over the sign of where the tavern is. I'm like, if I was there, like, I'll be going the wrong way, the wrong direction. I'm like, I'm good. I'm just going to go back.
Yeah,
But he just looks at it. He's scared. You could definitely tell he's scared, but he also knows he has to do this. And the general's also pushing him into going into the tavern. And as he goes in the tavern, you can definitely see the piano player is also scared for his life. And then you also see the tavern and the daughter and they don't want to serve the general, or they don't have a certain type of drink or food. No, it was the meat. It was the meat that
they don't serve meat at the tavern. And since you brought up the guy hanging from the thing, they also had a sign on him. Now it's written in Russian. And I don't. It's been a while since I watched it a week ago, and I don't speak Russian, but I do understand the letters. I can read Russian. It says something like partisan dogs or something like that, like a partisan something. And yeah, these are the Germans writing messages in Russian so that the people who live there can understand that they mean business. And with Mitka already being a part of another anti-Nazi group, that also sends a message to him and to the viewer that if he gets caught, this is how he's going to end up in. Now that is beside the point that he's Jewish, which in their mind he should be shot on sight. But
right,
to their minds, partisans and freedom fighters, they're traitors to the state in a way. They're traitors to the Third Reich. And yeah, back to the tavern. Like you see again the desperation of the tavern owner, and I apologize if I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but
it's okay.
Yeah, that scene where the officer just goes to the head to the manager of the tavern, the owner of the tavern, sorry, and he's like, "Come with me," and he takes him out the back, and you hear a gun being shot, and the way the little girl breaks down and starts crying. It's like she believes, the pianist believes, the violinist believes, you believe as a viewer, you believe that he shot the tavern owner for disobeying orders, again making an example of him, just like the guy hanging there. And then later it's revealed that no, he actually shot the dog.
Right. And I like that part. I mean, I don't like it, but you know what I'm saying. But that scene is for shock value, and it's shock value with a purpose. But when you see the tavern guy walk back in, the manager, you're just like, oh, good. You can actually let out a breath of fresh air. It was like, okay, he didn't shoot the tavern guy, but who did he shoot instead? Because he has to make a point. So what does he do? He winds up shooting the dog as a message. So you have two messages basically outside that tavern door. You have the body hanging hanging, and then you also have the dog. And Mitka's looking down at the dog. I still remember seeing how sad and pissed off he was at the fact that he killed an animal. And it broke my heart to see the dog die because of that.
Yeah, unfortunately I had to bury my dog a few years ago, but that really is filmmaking at its best. It both sends the message to the audience, but also it sets up the tension with making you feel that they shot the tavern owner by way of how the characters are reacting to a gunshot, not seeing a body, just hearing the gunshot and fearing what might have happened.
Exactly. And I think those little details is very important, because we can feel the tension in that room just like they are, because we for a minute can actually be in that room with them and feel the emotion of what they're going through. And I think it does a very nice job of actually doing that. And then you also have that other scene where the general's also talking to Mitka, wanting him to look at the violin case. And of course, the violin's inside the hole again. And at that point, you realize that, is he going to get caught because he actually has something else inside of the violin case? And then I'm over there holding my breath like, oh my God, is he going to open up that case whenever he has it? And then, of course, Mitka winds up stopping him from opening the case.
And when Mitka practically grabs it from his hands, I thought, yeah, that kid's dead. Like,
me too.
You do not do that to a Nazi officer out in the street in broad daylight. You do not do that. So
right.
The fact that he spared him, again, it keeps you on the edge of your seat, hearts pounding, like what's going to happen. Again, filmmaking at its best, the tension, it builds the atmosphere. You already have the understanding of the time period and who and what these characters are. So when something like this happens, I mean, it shocks you up. Like you lose all color on all of your face.
Exactly. And I think the reason why he spared him is because he needs him. He needs him for the dinner. Otherwise, it's just going to be the piano player, and he wants Mitka because of the fact that he's a great violin player.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
he tries to get on his good side, saying, "Oh, my niece is around your age, and she also plays violin or whatever he is." So like, he tries to sweet talk him. He tries to show him, "No, I'm a good guy. I'm on your side. I'm not a racist bigot who's responsible for the massacre of millions of people. I'm a good person."
Right. I don't know what you heard about all those other German guys. I'm the good guy here. Let's have some common ground. My niece is a violin player. Well, good for you, buddy. I'm glad that you're. Hopefully, she's not a bigot like you.
all these bodies, they died of natural causes.
Yeah, that's all. That's all we did. We just buried them and helped them. Yeah.
Yeah. And we ran out of space. We didn't want them to be cramped, so we burned the bodies as well.
Right.
That's what every natural person does.
But another thing I wanted to talk about was this: the old man with the piano player doesn't like the idea. Like I said, he didn't like the idea. But there's one thing that I wanted to mention there within the dialogue itself. Remember when he said you have to be a step ahead? Yeah. And he says you have to be a step ahead. So to me, that was like a reference to Mitka, where he actually not only has to be a step ahead of his music, but also has to be a step ahead of the Germans too. So that to me was a great metaphor of doing that to me, because of the fact that you're telling them, hey, look, not only do you have to pay attention to the notes on the paper, but you also have to go ahead and be ahead of the Germans as well. So that was something I liked.
I took it more as the man, the pianist, when he said that with the context of the music, but Mitka took it with the context of being ahead of the Germans.
Exactly. And this is also another thing too. Like, he's afraid to bomb the tavern because of the old man, and he's like, and when he goes over to his friend, he's like, "Look, there's other people in there besides Germans," and he even tries saving the guy's life. He winds up popping the string on purpose.
Popping the strings and telling them to go and get the other strings. He doesn't want to hurt the pianist. He doesn't want to hurt the girl, the waitress. He doesn't want to hurt the owner of the tavern. But on the other hand, you got this other guy, and essentially this kid has two father figures in the movie. There's one father figure telling him to watch his back, and the other father figure telling him to act by way of blowing up the tavern. And unfortunately, he does what he felt was necessary, and the pianist and the other people from the tavern were just casualties of war in a way.
Right, unfortunately. And I like the sound effect that they put in whenever he's covering up his ears, where you don't really hear the piano being played. It's muffled out as if we're there with him, but standing next to him, and our ears are being muffled out through that. And all we hear is like a little tiny thing of the piano being played. But then we're wondering, just like him, did the fuse go off? When is the fuse supposed to go off? It's supposed to be going off pretty soon. And then it's like that little delay, that little tension, and then it's released.
Yeah, it's like that scene in The Dark Knight with the delay and the explosion of the hospital.
Right, exactly.
Like, you know there's going to be an explosion, and when the explosion doesn't happen, you start to wonder, did the SS officers find the explosives and neutralize it? Are they going to shoot the pianist? Don't shoot the pianist. That's my Doctor Who reference for the day. Don't shoot. Are they going to shoot the pianist, thinking that he's responsible? Are they going to shoot the tavern owner? Did Mitka fail? That really is the heart of it. And then obviously the explosion happens, and it's really great timing within the movie of what he removes his ears from his hands from his ears, and then you hear the explosion, and then his ears there's that ringing in his ear. which is now in our ears as well
Sure.
because we're hearing what he can hear. Too many H words in the same sentence. You catch my
Yeah.
meaning? It's like
Yes, I do. Yeah.
it's a classic example of that's been used in movies all the time. Like the I'm gonna use Elmer Fudd as the example here. The trying to shoot the gun doesn't work. He looks inside the barrel and accidentally shoots himself in the face.
Right.
That's pretty much the same thing. He knows that there's going to be an explosion. He muffles his ears. Nothing happens. He removes it, and then the explosion happens. And then instead of running away, he's disorientated because I don't know if you knew this, but ears are very important for motor functions in a way.
Exactly. And I definitely like that little sound, the fact that you hear the ringing in his ears, and it's like the ringing in our ears, like you mentioned. And then of course he does what his other father figure told him to do. After you get done, after the explosion, run into the woods. Don't look for me. Look, and that's exactly what he does. He runs into the woods. We see other people that are survivors of this, of what's going on, and he's walking with them. And then he sees his other father figure later on, and then it cuts to black, and then that's it.
Yeah, and earlier I forgot to mention he doesn't run away immediately. He waits for the explosion to happen because he needs to know that the mission was a success, that he succeeded. And then he runs, and then he runs to find the other people in the forest, and then the guy tells him, "Tzedek lekulanu," justice for all, which not 100% good, 100% translated, but it gets the point across.
Right, definitely. I'm glad that you were able to translate that for me because I didn't know what that meant. So thank you for the translation on that.
It means justice for all of us, but the subtitles that they said justice for all. So
I like yours better. I like yours a tad better than the subtitle part, but that's just like a little nitpick with the movie itself.
I saw that. I mean, I saw that, and it said justice for all, and I'm like, not all. That's why the what he actually said, not what they translated. That's better. That's better than what the translation was.
I gotcha. Well, that's everything as far as our review goes. But what did you think of the film in its entirety? I know that you, from what I know of, you enjoy this movie. For the short.
Yeah, I did, and I have done my fair. I have watched my fair share of Holocaust movies, both based on true stories and loosely based on true stories, and just movies set in or around that area, but not necessarily tied to any one specific real life person. This was really well made, and when you're making a short film, you have a limited time. By definition, you have a very limited time to establish the
character growth, and the pacing of it, and knowing where you want to go with it.
And I think they did a wonderful job with this one.
Most definitely, man. I really enjoy this. The pacing of it, the characterization of the characters. We understand who these characters are. We understand the conflict within these city walls that they're going through. This, to me, is a perfectly well-balanced, quality short film that no wonder why the Holly Shorts Film Festival, and also, too, no wonder why this is actually an Oscar contender, because of the fact that this is a great short film. I definitely recommend anybody, if you guys are into history, or if you have a history class and you're looking for a 30-minute movie, this is it. But here's the thing. I don't know when this is going to be released to the public, but when it does, I'll put it into the description box, just like I did with all the other short films I reviewed, so that way you guys can check it out for yourselves, because 50 and I both enjoy this movie. I think this movie deserves a lot of credit for what it has. So that's it as far as the show goes. 50, do you have anything going on as far as your shows go or anything like that?
Well, before that, I don't know what else is in contention for an Oscar, but not knowing that, I'd say this thing is worthy of being nominated. I don't know if win, because again, I don't know what it's potentially running against, but I would say that this is worthy to be in Oscar conversations.
Most definitely. All right, so that's going to be it as far as the show goes. Thank you, 50, so much for joining me for this for this segment. I do appreciate it, and I hope that you come back again for another review.
Yeah, I'd love to. Do I say my plugs now?
Yeah. Go on ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so you can find me on my own YouTube channel, 50 Shades of Geek. Speaking of Doctor Who, I do weekly reviews of every single Doctor Who episode from 1963 all the way up to 2022. And right now I'm on the third season from 1965 to 1966. And I also talk even more Doctor Who on the Northern Entertainment Group YouTube channel, a show I do called The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. I just finished recording another episode before doing this. And I also have another show with my good friend Soda on the Northern Entertainment Group YouTube channel called Found with Flags, where we both take turns in talking and educating the other about our countries. He teaches me once a week. He teaches me about Canada, and the opposite week I teach him about Israel. So that's really all I've got going on at the moment.
Okay. Well, guys, you guys can always go on ahead and follow me underneath Movie Lovers Unite. And of course, you guys can go on and find our audio podcast on all major podcast platforms. And always until next time, guys, bye-bye.